What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. Unfortunately, our co-host Matthew can't make it as he is battling strep throat. So we wish him all the best. So it's just me and Ed tonight. And Ed, why don't we just get right into it? Um, you know, Trevor Lawrence goes down with an injury. And this seems to be a recurring theme. Anthony Richardson is out with an injury. Joe Burrow is out with an injury. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to be out for the season. I think I saw that he's day to day. I could be wrong on that, but it doesn't seem to be as bad as we thought. But what do you make of all these injuries that we're seeing, especially at the quarterback position?
Well, what kind of got me thinking about this is when Jordan Travis went down with that horrific leg injury a couple of weeks ago, that got me thinking that gets them out of the college football playoff. But how are these quarterback injuries affecting the NFL playoffs coming up?
Yeah,
And
sorry,
just
Jacksonville, you're out of the playoffs.
well, let's just go down the list, will you? Because there's so many quarterbacks that have missed significant time with injury. We're going to go with Aaron Rodgers. Trevor Lawrence is going to be out. Kenny Pickett's out. Anthony Richardson's out. Joe Burrow's out. Deshaun Watson's out. Jimmy Garoppolo's out. Justin Fields is out. Daniel Jones is out. Kyler Murray's missed time. And we got Kirk Cousins. You like that? You like that? I mean, we're starting 49 different quarterbacks have started a game this year. The NFL record is 68. You know when that was set? Last year. We still have 4 to 5 more weeks left to go in this season, and we're only 18 quarterbacks behind from breaking the NFL record for starting quarterbacks again. You know, you look at what the expectation of this season was going to start at. I mean, it's just been Night of the Living Dead out there. Just injuries left and right, and it is completely topsy turvied. Most of the AFC for sure. A few more on the NFC side, but it's really led to more discussions about how much money do you allocate to the quarterback position in one and two. I mean, what are you thinking?
Um, I I honestly don't know. I mean, I haven't really thought about it that much. Unless I was I don't know if you were looking for an answer there or if it was just more like a what are you thinking, like a rhetorical question kind of
No,
thing.
I like what are your thoughts? I mean, do you start putting more money toward the quarterback position even more so than you are already with these mega contracts?
Well, then at that point, doesn't it just seem like you're just wasting money? Because if these quarterbacks just keep getting injured and you keep, pouring money into them, then it just feels like you're wasting money, which I know is a crazy thing to say because your quarterback is absolutely the one that you want to invest in the most. But if the quarterbacks keep getting injured, then in my opinion, maybe I don't know. It's really crazy that all these injuries are happening. And the thing with Trevor Lawrence too is that he got injured in Jacksonville, and I can't help but notice that one of Florida's best players, Shamar James, also suffered a season-ending injury in that exact same football stadium. Maybe it's a coincidence, but I have heard of major issues being at that stadium, so I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, at this point, you're starting to see why the methodology that San Francisco is going under is so successful. You're spending basically nothing on a quarterback and you're getting top end results. So that leads to all the other positions being, not as important as a quarterback, but by collective, they can be just as important uh, as that one player on your roster. But are there some other injuries out there that I'm not really taking a look at, outside of the quarterback position?
I've noticed there's been injuries to a lot of defensive backs and some big names too. In fact, I have a list here. Let me read them off to you, okay? And for the record, these guys they're either questionable or out or on the on IR. But the point is, they've all suffered an injury to some degree or another, okay? And they include, but are certainly not limited to, Marlon Humphrey of the Ravens, Trey White and Kyer Elam of the Bills, J.C. Horn of the Panthers, Denzel Ward of the Browns, Trayvon Diggs of the Cowboys, C.J. Gardner Johnson of the Lions, and Javon Holland of the Dolphins. Like I said, okay, these are some big time names at the defensive back position. A friend and I were actually talking about this earlier today, and maybe I'm off base here. So I might be crazy here, but could the reason why we're seeing significant injuries at well, maybe not significant injuries, but could the reason why we're seeing injuries among these big time defensive backs could it possibly be because they're being overly aggressive? I mean, receivers today are more talented, faster than they've ever been before. I mean, I feel like we say that every year, but every year it seems like it's true. So it seems like because of how good these receivers are, then defensive backs kind of have to like play more aggressive just to catch up with these speedsters, and then as a result, it costs them. Maybe I'm off base there, but it just seems kind of unusual. Not that we have a lot of defensive backs injured, but the names of the defensive backs who are getting injured.
Well, and how do you defend speed? You defend speed with physicality. So, you have to get more in their face. You have to reroute those wide receivers. You're right. There have been a plethora of, top end wide receiver talent come out over the past few years in the draft. And, the only way that you're going to combat that is by, getting top end defensive backs, but part of being that position is you have to be physical with the receiver. Otherwise, they're just going to run slant and go on you the entire game, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, the rules are already stacked against the defensive players anyway. So what does that matter? You know, I mean, outside of a certain cornerback the other day against the Chiefs from a team that shall not be named, you know, you know that uh, that's really what needs to happen. But what I what I fear is something that we talked about a few weeks ago is the overall lack of practice to build up the body to handle the physicality that's being asked of these players. So you know, I mean, what do you think about that idea?
Um, my friend that I had mentioned before brought up that exact same point. They're not really practicing to the extent that they should be practicing. That it's really more like recess than practice. His words, not mine. But I thought it was a good point. But something else to add too is, do you think it's possible that the season being longer is contributing to this? I know it's only one more game, but it's still longer nonetheless.
Well, when you're looking at the preseason, you used to have basically two games for sure that your starters are not going to be in there. Now, all you're doing is uh, there were so many starters that didn't even play a snap in the preseason. That they came out in week one and it was garbage football. It was like it looked like they hadn't been practicing or playing. Whereas at least when we had the preseason of 4 games, there was at least one game in there where you kept your starters in for at least a half, maybe 3 quarters, just to see some cohesion there with those players. But with the way the collective bargaining agreement is sitting right now, they're basically hamstrung on how much a player can actually practice and get themselves ready for what they are about to embark on over the course of now 17 games, as opposed to what used to be a 16-game season. You
Y-
know, go ahead.
Yep. No, no, you can go ahead. I think you're about to finish your thoughts, so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, at least for this season, what do you think the end result is for all these injuries taking place?
Oh, I mean, I think it sounds cheap to say, but I think we're just going to see more injuries at the quarterback position. Now, if you're asking me what the end result is going to be as to how are we going to how are we going to solve this to prevent this from happening? Well, it seems like better practice methods would certainly suffice. Um, but but maybe we need to approach the quarterback situation differently. I mean, you said it yourself. I mean, San Francisco hasn't really invested much in the quarterback, position, but they've invested elsewhere, and they've been arguably the best team in the league for the past few years. Now, the only pushback against that I will have is that the team that just won the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs, recently signed Patrick Mahomes to a mega deal a few years ago. Now, if the 49ers win the Super Bowl this year with their method, with their approach, then I'm 100% all in on what you're saying. And I think if the 49ers win the Super Bowl, it will signal a new era of the NFL. But what are your thoughts?
Well, in the 40 years that I've been watching sports, I would say 30 years ago, I really started paying attention to how teams were being built overall. And what I've seen from general managers, whether it be football, baseball, basketball, hockey, cricket, soccer, whatever sport, those GMs, they make decisions based upon what they can explain in their next interview. Not uh, more of a CYA method overall, uh, as opposed to actually maybe looking at a new way of doing things, which, to San Francisco's credit, that's what they're doing. They're looking at a new way of doing things that it is more sustainable for long term success. Because I would be shocked if we didn't see a turnover at quarterback when Purdy starts asking for, his big contract, which to him, I would imagine, $5 million is a big contract, considering that he's
Mm,
basically living out of a Hyundai. But uh, when it comes to, what's the end result, long term, that remains to be seen. But as for this season, I think we're seeing a complete turnover in who we expected to be the AFC representative going into the season, but not as much on the NFC side. Uh, we were talking about AFC being a murderer's row of
mhm.
quarterbacks, going into the season. Now, not so much. I mean, you've got two, maybe three left standing, versus in the NFC where you still have Jalen Hurts, you still have Brock Purdy, you still have Dak Prescott, you still have um, oh, who am I forgetting? Uh, throw out a name. Uh,
Uh, Geno Smith. Uh,
oh no! Oh wow! Okay, never mind. We'll stop that one. Uh,
you said
but
throw out a name, so
I got you.
did you
I got
did
you.
you say Dak? Did you say Dak Prescott? By the way,
I did. I
okay.
did. Um,
And yeah, I can't think of anybody else.
but as far as the end result, you get what I'm saying. The NFC is definitely way ahead of the AFC this year
Could
because
it?
of so many quarterbacks, which these teams are being built around, have been dropping like flies.
Were you thinking of Jared Goff? By the way,
Uh, Maybe a little bit. Uh,
okay.
I certainly don't put Jared Goff in the same stratosphere as I do Jalen Hurts, or you know, he's just been better than mid, but
That's
not
fair. Yeah,
excellent.
yeah,
You
that's
know,
fair.
so uh, but to transition off of that, we're seeing the end of the college football season, which in the end of college football season, we get to award season. So that's an exciting argument that a lot of people love to have. And, you know, we've got the Heisman finalist sitting out there, but I have a feeling that somebody got on Street's corner that doesn't need to be there. What are you thinking, David?
You're damn right, Ed. Okay. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a Heisman finalist. And what the hell for? Why on earth is this guy a Heisman finalist? Okay, first of all, before I go on my rant, okay, let me just say that I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is easily the best pro prospect among college wide receivers. He's going to be the first wide receiver taken, and he's going to have the best. He'll more than likely have the best pro career. Okay, and so you're going to listen to my rant, and if or when Marvin Harrison Jr. has a great NFL career, you're gonna be like, see, David, see, why are you hitting on him now? Look how he's tearing up the league. And I'm gonna be like, yeah, good for him. That was never my point, okay? My point is that Marvin Harrison Jr. is overrated, okay? Yeah, I said it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the most overrated wide receiver in the country. Might be the most overrated player in the country, okay? Now, is he a great player? Is he a great receiver? Yes, okay? But we need to go over some facts and figures here, okay? Um, Marvin Harrison Jr. has been held to 30 receiving yards or less 4 times. Now, to his credit, he has shown up in big games, like against Michigan. Okay, but you know who else has shown up in big games? Malik Neighbors. Again, like when he went off against Alabama. How in the hell is Marvin Harrison Jr. a finalist over Malik Neighbors? Okay, and by the way, Malik Neighbors has more receiving yards, the same amount of touchdowns, and does not have a single game of 30 receiving yards or less. Like I said before, Marvin Harrison Jr. has 4 of those. In fact, the fewest receiving yards that Neighbors has had this season was 67, which was LSU's first game of the season against Florida State. But since then, he's had at least 87 receiving yards in every single game, all right? And I know people are going to say, but David, Marvin Harrison Jr. has Kyle McCord throwing to him. And Malik Neighbors has the likely Heisman winner and Jaden Daniels throwing to him. Okay, let's go over that. Let's crunch that just a little bit, okay? LSU is run friendly, all right? Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that LSU has 405 rush attempts and 366 pass attempts. LSU has more rush attempts than they do pass attempts, and they're certainly more run friendly than Ohio State is. Meanwhile, Ohio State is more pass friendly than LSU is, right? And I'm not saying that Ohio State is a better passing offense than LSU is. What I'm saying is that you compare their passing and rushing attempts, right? Ohio State has 376 pass attempts, and I forget what their rushing attempts were. But it is fewer. They do have fewer rush attempts than they do pass attempts, right? And like I said, Ohio State is more pass friendly than LSU is, as they have 10 more pass attempts than they do. Marvin Harrison Jr. plays in a system that benefits him more, whereas Malik Neighbors is playing with arguably another wide receiver one. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the clear go-to guy in his offense and thus should have better numbers, but he doesn't. And people are going to say, oh yeah, but it's still Kyle McCord. It's still Kyle McCord. Okay, then explain to me how Marvin Harrison Jr. only has 25 receiving yards and averaged 6.3 yards per reception against a team like Rutgers. Oh, but he had 2 touchdowns. Okay. Well, in games where Neighbors had 2 touchdown catches, in those games, the fewest receiving yards he had is 121. So Marvin Harrison Jr. shows up big against big competition, but is somehow more inconsistent against lesser competition. Oh, and by the way, do you know how many games Neighbors has where he's averaging at least 10 yards a reception? Zero. But it's still Kyle McCord. Yeah, I am just so freaking sick and tired of the excuses already when it comes to Kyle McCord, okay? Because as a receiver, if you're really as good as people say you are, then elevate your quarterback. Mike Evans did it with Johnny Manziel at A&M. Amari Cooper did it with Blake Sims at Alabama. Ah, but David, Johnny Football won the Heisman. Yeah, he did. And he earned the hell out of that trophy, and I was super happy that he won it. But there's a reason why Johnny Football has been out of the NFL for almost 10 years now, while Mike Evans continues to stack up 1,000-yard receiving seasons, okay? I don't care who your quarterback is. When you come in as a generational talent, as the undisputed receiver and best receiver in college football, I'm sorry, but I'm going to hold you to a higher standard, okay? And if that is still not enough, then at the end of the day, just invite both. Just invite both receivers to New York, okay? I don't see why you can't do that. I don't see why you can't invite more people to New York because let me tell you something. It is going to be a bad look if the guy who wins the Blitnikoff isn't even a Heisman finalist, and that's the Streets Corner.
Well, you gotta. I'm glad you got that off your chest there. You did mention the Bolitnikoff Award finalist, and those were announced. It is Marvin Harrison Jr., Romeo Dunze, and Malik Neighbors. So we are going to see, them being compared in the same pool. So we'll see what comes out of that. As great as Malik Neighbors has been, I wouldn't overlook Romeo Dunze myself because he's playing with two other NFL wide receivers, getting the ball passed around with him and Michael Penix, just as an alternative to who you're saying in Malik Neighbors. But back to Marvin Harrison Jr., he had 6 games in which he caught 5 or fewer passes. Now, if I'm looking at a Heisman finalist as a wide receiver, you should be averaging 9 to 10 catches a game with multiple punt and kickoff returns. As a wide receiver, I don't understand that idea that a wide receiver can win the Heisman by only catching passes. Because guess what? The quarterback has to get the ball to him. So there really are other ways for him to contribute without just catching passes. So I I wasn't real keen on uh Devon on Smith a couple of years ago winning the Heisman because it shouldn't be just catching passes that get you the award because the person that's throwing it to you should get the award because he's not only throwing to you, he's throwing to everybody else too. But that's just my 2 cents on that, and I'll throw that in the cup on Street's corner there.
I can sort of understand Devontae Smith winning the Heisman because if I remember correctly, Devontae Smith actually started that season as the second wide receiver, but Alabama's top receiver, I don't even remember who he was. Got injured for the season, so I think that kind of factored in. And again, like I said, okay, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a great talent, okay, but just spare me on the whole damn. Oh, he's got Kyle McCord. Like I said, if you're really as great as people say you are, then you elevate your quarterback. We've seen other receivers do it. Okay, why can't Marvin Harrison Jr. do it?
Well, and when you're talking about putting Marvin Harrison Jr. up there when they're only allowing 3 guys to be on the television show, because that's what it is, you know, who do you put up there in his place?
Like as to replace him,
Yeah,
Malik Neighbors easily. And if that doesn't work, then just how about we invite all three Heisman finalists? I know that's not realistic, um, but
I
still,
I don't necessarily have a problem with doing that. If you have to have a fourth show up to the TV show just as a pat on the head for a good job, you did such a good job. You get to be on the TV show. You know,
yeah.
then why not Jalen Milrow? He's come up from basically nothing, getting benched against South Florida of all teams. to being one of the most explosive and dynamic quarterbacks in the country. He wasn't there at the beginning, so he didn't get any hype with him to start. So that's why you're not seeing him, you know, be in the big discussion as we get toward the end because he wasn't there at the beginning. Because, in my opinion, the people that vote for that stuff, they had their favorites to begin with, and they're
Mhm.
not going to say that they made a mistake and said that their picks were off to begin with.
Oh, yeah,
So they're going to
for sure.
carry those guys all the way through. So that's where that is.
Yeah,
You know,
no, I agree. Marvin
and we
Harrison
both have
Jr.
an idea that Jaden Daniels is going to win the Heisman. We both said it out loud. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, where are Marvin Harrison Jr.'s highlight ESPN, lead in plays? They're not there. That's what this whole award has become, in my not so humble opinion, is that if you are not creating all those highlight reel plays, then you're not going to be, one of the top dogs, top options when it comes to the Heisman Trophy.
Ed, I'm about to say something that's going to sound egregious, but I actually think that Marvin Harrison Jr. being a finalist for the Heisman Trophy is actually even crazier than when Stetson Bennett was a Heisman finalist last year. Because at least in Bennett's case, at least you can argue, well, he's the quarterback of the best team in college football, and the quarterback is the most important player. Okay, with Marvin Harrison Jr., like it really does seem like he was a predetermined pick, and that he's just there based on his name only. But I don't want to drag on him too much. You know who else probably should have been invited? Ed, can you
Who's that?
take a guess?
Who do you got?
Jordan Travis. Clearly,
Oh,
the committee
there it
thinks that
is.
FSU was trash without him, so invite him to New York.
Yeah, he gets a free trip. Yay!
Yeah.
So, uh, which we love talking about these football things, just as Matthew said in our last episode, but there are other things going on, and one of the things that got started over this past weekend were the winter meetings, which, let's be honest, this is really just an Otani watch.
It really is.
This week,
Yeah.
because every little thing that anybody does or says that is part of the Otani watch is being broadcast like it's the biggest news story in Major League Baseball. Right now, you've got the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, and the Cubs, kind of off in the peripheral, uh, being teams that are really making a push to get Otani. In fact, the Blue Jays this week brought Otani down to Florida, down to their spring training facility, and had a long, long meeting
Mm.
about trying to bring him up to the Great White North. So, there are some people wondering if that really kind of sways him a little bit because he's said out loud that he likes Toronto. But overall, I'm seeing a lot of his culture come out in which you don't see a lot of people talk about money. You don't see them talk about where it all comes from, just that they get it. So there's very tight-lipped community talking about Shohei Otani's, free agency conversations out there.
Mhm.
Are you seeing anything different, David?
No, not really. And when it comes to the Blue Jays, correct me if I'm wrong, but they barely missed the playoffs, right? Like I think they missed the playoffs by like a game or two. Like Shohei Otani
It-
could be that missing link that actually, propels them into the playoffs and possibly for a deep run.
yeah, and he's going to have plenty of help in that lineup, to help cover him. One of the problems with being on the Angels is you get through two batters and nobody scares you.
Yeah,
With
yeah,
the
exactly.
Blue Jays, you've got three or four guys that can help, kind of run cover for Otani to keep him from getting walked every time he goes up to bat.
Yeah. And also, we know that there hasn't been a lot of activity going on during the winter meeting so far, but I think that's for a couple of reasons. I think one, teams are just waiting to see what happens with Otani. They're just kind of like the teams in which they know they're out of it, they're just kind of sitting back waiting to see what happens. And then the teams that know that that they know they're in it, like the Cubs and the Dodgers and the Blue Jays, they're just kind of, waiting for the cards to unfold. But also at the end of the day, Ed, the meeting's just started. Like, if this had been going on for like a month or two, then that'd be one thing. But isn't it a little too early to be overreacting to the little activity that we've been seeing? I mean, they literally just started.
True. And really, I think what they're doing is waiting for the market to be set and not necessarily on Shohei Otani. The market being set by Bellinger and Soto. Where and for how much are those guys getting signed? That's what's going to set the market. And I think those guys are waiting for Otani to sign so they can figure out where their value lies. So, you know, we've already seen that the veteran pitcher market is about 13 million a year.
Mhm.
In fact, Craig Kimbrell just got signed for 13 million. I I forget the team.
It's the
Uh,
Orioles.
it's the Orioles,
Yeah, yeah.
which uh, I'll talk about them here in a second. Uh, but now that we know what the veteran pitcher market is, we need to know what the top end big bat in the lineup market is, and that's
Yeah.
where we'll start seeing some of these pieces fall. I mean, there's been some small trades back and forth, but for those those club changing players, we've got to see the market get set before we start seeing the dominoes fall.
For the record, by the way, I think Juan Soto signed with the Yankees. Let me check real quick.
I know that they were talking about it, and it was getting closer earlier in the day.
Yeah.
So
Uh
I if I
Yeah, a few
missed it,
hours ago, it says the Yankees are finalizing trade for Padres outfielder Juan Soto. So maybe it hasn't happened yet, but it seems like it's getting closer and closer.
okay, so it's imminent.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing that we know happens during the winter meetings now is the MLB draft uh, takes place next summer, but
Mhm.
they do a lottery for the top picks, much like NBA does now.
Yeah.
Uh, and we had a surprise winner of that lottery to get the number one overall pick. Just going back from five, number five, the Chicago White Sox, they had a 14% chance of getting the first pick. The A's are the fourth pick, and they had an 18% chance. The Rockies had an 18% chance and wound up at the third pick. The Cincinnati Reds wound up with the second pick at a 0.9% chance of getting the first pick. And then the
Damn.
Cleveland Guardians got the first pick for the first time in their club history. That's a
Wow.
long time, you know,
Yeah.
with only a 2% chance.
Well, let
You
me
know,
just
so
say, congrats to the Guardians on your right to draft Jack Caglione with the first overall pick. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just going to point out that with all these moves that happen in the winter meetings, those are those tend to be for established players. When you're looking at the draft and the prospects and the farm systems that are out there, the Guardians, they've got guys in the farm system that they could be bringing up within the next year. You know, and then you tack on a first overall pick. They get this right, they could be set for a long time. The Cincinnati Reds, everybody knows they have a pretty strong farm system, so they're going to continue to grow on that. Nobody's beating the Orioles right now as far as farm system. In fact, some of the players that they brought up last season to get to the number one record in the AL are still listed as farm system players. So that's just part of that back and forth in midseason. But those, you're looking at the future when it comes to the draft, you know, and when we're talking about these winter meetings happening, some of those players might wind up getting shipped to other places to better their stock
Mm.
for a player like that Soto draft that you're talking about, that's imminent. We've yet to see what the details on that. They could be looking at getting a couple of players out of it, that are in the farm system that are just about ready to go. So you can see the growth of these players and them being just about on the cusp to come up to the major leagues. You know, are there any uh, players from the grand state of Florida or that you've been keeping an eye on?
There's one player saw, one player from the Rays that I saw today that was in the trade talks, and I for the life of me can't even remember who he was, even though it was I literally just saw it today. Who was it? Was it
Don't get me lying to you, but something I did see for all those SEC fans that we know, Paul
yeah.
Skeens is already the number one prospect in pitching
Well,
in the farm system out there.
not surprised. I mean, the dude, I mean, in all my years of watching college baseball, Ed Paul Skeens is far and away the best college pitcher I have ever seen, bar none. Like, nobody else can touch him. I'm not saying he's the best that college baseball has ever seen, but in my lifetime, he's the best college pitcher that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and we're super excited to see all these players develop and just keep it moving. But speaking of keeping it moving, that's about all the time that we have for today. We'd like to thank everybody. Please like and subscribe. For David Street, I'm Ed Smith, and we are rounding third and headed for home.
Later, y'all.